Good day everyone, and welcome to Adventures with Parker. It's been a while since we've done a theme park parlay episode, but we are back, and this one is exciting because it has to do with my home park, Canada's Wonderland. This news has been plastered all over social media for the past few days, but if you don't know what I'm talking about here, the park recently sent out a survey to pass holders asking for their opinions on 3 unique coaster concepts, nicknamed the Blast Coaster, the Concert Coaster, and Eureka Ridge Ghost Town. The survey briefly described each concept and asked guests to share their thoughts and initial reactions on each. Now, I didn't receive this survey myself, so everything I'm about to share here about these concepts comes from secondary sources. However, all of these ideas are so unique and so interesting in their own right, and I have tons of thoughts and discussions about each one that I want to discuss. So without any further ado, let's talk theme parks. Before we begin, I just want to reiterate that these are just general concepts that the park might be considering. This project, whatever it ends up becoming, is still very early in the planning stages. And although the park has shared some solid ideas here, it doesn't mean that they'll be built exactly as they're described and depicted in the concept art, if they even move forward with them at all. Keeping all that in mind, let's not waste any time here, and let's dive into our first concept, the Blast Coaster. The official description reads as follows. A strange, unexplainable force has taken over the core of Wonder Mountain. Strap into your wind coaster car and prepare for an exhilarating high-speed launch that propels you through a cavernous subterranean tunnel and into the heart of the mountain. Suddenly, you are blasted straight up and out of the summit's highest peak. Experience awe-inspiring views as you soar high above Canada's Wonderland and encounter a thrilling series of heart-pounding twists and dizzying turns. Now, I'm going to say what everyone is thinking here. This sounds like the spiritual successor to Volcano the Blast Coaster, which was an intimate suspended catapult coaster that operated at King's Dominion from 1998 to 2018. But the interesting thing is that although the description mentions that this would be a wing coaster, the concept art seems to depict a B&M invert. We've seen B&M do launched wing coasters before, such as Thunderbird at Holiday World, but never a launched invert. In fact, the only manufacturer that I know of that has ever attempted a launch invert is Intamin, in the form of Volcano and their Impulse coasters. That said, with the introduction of rides like Pipeline at SeaWorld Orlando, we have seen B&M start to experiment more with their products lately, and Canada's Wonderland has a long history of being used as the testing ground for many prototypes, so either coaster type would be possible. Wing or invert, I think this would be a great fit for Wonderland, and it would help to round out the park's coaster lineup. Overall, I really like this concept. It seems to be the most intense and thrilling of the 3 coasters mentioned in the survey, and I like the idea of expanding upon the mythology and narrative of Wonder Mountain. What is this strange and inexplicable force that they're speaking of? Is it in any way connected to the other rides that interact with the mountain, like Thunder Run, Vortex, and Wonder Mountain's Guardian? There's so much storytelling potential here, and I feel like this ride will make good use of special effects and theming to bring that story to life. I do have some concerns though. First of all, I consider Wonder Mountain to be one of the most beautiful and stunning park icons, not only in the Cedar Fair chain, but of any theme park out there, even rivaling some of the iconic icons of Disney and Universal parks. There are already 3 coasters that interact with the mountain, but none of them are visible from International Street in the front of the park. The visuals presented in the concept art are cool, but I fear that a giant track protruding from the side of the mountain would detract from the beauty and grandeur of this iconic landmark. I'm honestly not sure how I would feel about it. Second, I wonder if anything would need to be removed to create enough space for the ride. The coaster appears to be right near Wonder Mountain's Guardian, like right there. Now, I don't think that losing that particular ride would be a huge loss. I mean, we'd be losing both a dark ride and a coaster, which would suck, but Guardian has been riddled with issues for years, and is one of my least ridden rides in the park. That said, I've always held out hope that it would receive a major update one day, so it would be sad to see it go away completely. However, according to my friend Wonderland Weekly, there is space to build the ride without removing anything. He said that they could use the existing mountain basement access between International Street and International Showplace for the launch tunnel, go under Guardian Station, then blast up past Guardian's upper level and out. Wonderland has always been super creative when it comes to working new rides into existing infrastructure, so it wouldn't surprise me if the park decided to play a game of roller coaster Tetris with this one. My only other concern is that they might still need to remove International Showplace for the outdoor sections, but I'm sure they could easily find a new location for the entertainment offerings held there if that were the case. Okay, moving on to concept number 2, we have the concert coaster. Here's the park's official description. Live your greatest rockstar dream as you and your bandmates go backstage, behind the velvet ropes, hop on a wind coaster car, and launch, literally, into a coaster light-filled stage for the ultimate, thrilling, pulse-pounding rock experience. A classic guitar riff sends you zooming over spectators' heads and into a series of intense, high-speed inversions, all accompanied by your wind coaster's dynamic onboard audio system, blasting multiple classic audio tracks played by some of Canada's greatest bands. Okay, we have a lot to unpack here. Again, it looks like Wonderland is leaning towards a launched wing coaster. I think a B&M wing would be a great fit for the park overall, as it provides a unique sensation that differs from any existing coaster in the park. However, I get the feeling that this iteration would be very compact. It wouldn't be as tall or as long as rides like Gatekeeper or Wild Eagle, especially if we consider that, at least according to my interpretation, this coaster would likely be housed indoors. That said, there's plenty of compact coasters out there that really pack a punch. As long as B&M ensures that these transitions are whippy and intense, it should still be a great ride regardless of size and footprint. And if the coaster is completely indoors, it would be able to operate during the colder months of the year, such as during Winterfest. The notion of using music on a roller coaster is a tried and true favorite, with rides like Rock and Roller Coaster and Cosmic Rewind being fan favorites of their respective parks. I especially love how the description mentions that it would feature Canadian bands. Like, I can only imagine how fun it would be to zoom through this coaster while the speakers blast, I don't know, Marianas Trench, the Arkells, Rush, Shania Twain. It would be so epic and so fun. Now, although I agree that the concept coaster is a neat concept, I struggle to see how it would fit into the park. First of all, where would it even go? I was a little stuck on this question for a while, but other people have pointed out how this ride could replace Time Warp. That would open up enough space, but it doesn't make sense thematically. As far as I know, Cedar Fair is focusing on improving the theming throughout their parks, and are working on making the theming within each land a little more cohesive. If the coaster were to replace Time Warp, that would place it in the World Expo area. The park hasn't done too much with this land since it was renamed back in 2019, but I don't think the concert theme fits the World's Fair idea very well. However, one place that I could see this ride working in, and one that I haven't seen talked about much yet, is the old Kingswood Music Theater space. The old amphitheater closed down a few years ago, and once the structure is completely removed, the park is going to be left with a sizable plot of land for expansion. It would certainly offer enough space for a large show building, and this ride could be better integrated thematically into Action Zone, or a new area altogether. The last question I have about this concept is the line mentioning that the coaster would see riders zooming over spectators' heads. Who are these spectators? I'm assuming we're talking about actual people here and not just props or animatronics. I have two theories about this. The first, and the most plausible of the two, is that the queue will be located beneath the track, so that the spectators will just be guests waiting in line before they board. My other idea is that the coaster could debut alongside a permanent dance party space, similar to the ones we see at Halloween Haunt and Winterfest. It would certainly be different, but given their popularity at these seasonal attractions, I don't think it would be too implausible. And finally, our third concept, and my personal favorite of the three, is the Eureka Ridge Ghost Town. Here's what the park has to say about it. Adventure and excitement await visitors to the small Canadian frontier mining town of Eureka Ridge Ghost Town and its signature wooden family coaster. Board your train car for a thrilling, harrowing, off-the-rails ride experience full of exciting drops, hair-raising turns, and a dynamic, explosive ending in the tunnels of an old abandoned gold mine. I love this idea so much, and I think it makes the most sense given the park's focus on Frontier Canada over the past few years. I also think that the park is in desperate need of a modern Woody. No offense to Wild Beast or Mindbuster, but they're among my least favorite wooden coasters out there, so I'd love to see something fresh and fun from GCI or even Gravity Group. Looking at the concept art, it appears that this ride would also incorporate a spiral lift hill akin to Zambezi Zinger at Worlds of Fun. I also like the notion that it will end with a grand finale with tunnels and special effects. I absolutely love when a coaster is able to tell a story, and it makes me so happy to see that Wonderland might have an opportunity to create such an experience with this ride. I also like how it would expand on the ever-growing narrative of Frontier Canada. Speaking of which, I like how this concept is more than just a roller coaster. The concept is really presented as an entire themed experience. It would place guests into an immersive environment of which the coaster would just be the centerpiece. It sounds like this old mining town would incorporate a unique interactive element. Think of the former Forbidden Frontier from Cedar Point or Ghost Town Alive at Knott's Berry Farm. Something where guests can explore, interact with live characters, and immerse themselves into a living narrative. I know Forbidden Frontier didn't do so well, but I'd argue that that attraction suffered from poor marketing, a bad location, and being that it was such an interactive experience, I think the pandemic might have played a part in its demise by making that sort of thing less appealing. Ghost Town Alive, on the other hand, is extremely popular and is proof that this kind of thing could be successful in a Cedar Fair park. Plus, a headlining coaster would draw guests into the area, which would make it a little more visible and noticeable to a casual guest. I do have a major concern with this concept though. Both the Blast Coaster and the Concert Coaster were described as intense thrill experiences, whereas this concept is labeled as a family wooden coaster. And although I usually die on the hill that family coasters are essential for theme parks, I was really hoping that if Canada's Wonderland did get a new wooden coaster, it would be an airtime-filled masterpiece like Mystic Timbers. And I mean, we just got a new kids coaster this year with Snoopy's Racing Railway, and we already have a wooden coaster for families with Ghoster Coaster. I might be selfish, but I want a proper thrill ride, and I think the park's next coaster should be a headlining thrill attraction. That said, I'm also the kind of person who really values good theming and storytelling, even more so than I do thrill, so I'd probably be okay with this either way. As for the location, my assumption is that it would be part of Frontier Canada. I've always thought that the island in the middle of Whitewater Canyon would be a prime location for the land's next big attraction. I've also heard people suggest that it could replace Time Warp and Flight Deck, but again, this wouldn't make sense thematically, and I think theming is something that Wonderland is really taking into consideration when they come to build this new coaster. And that brings me to my overall thoughts on all this. With all three of these concepts, we can see that the park wants to build something that tells a story, adds to the overall narrative of the park, and makes use of some special effects. None of these concepts are just a coaster. Over the past few years, we've seen Wonderland slowly start to transform into a proper theme park. In 2019, the park introduced Frontier Canada, renamed part of Action Zone to once again become the Grand World Exposition, and they reverted some of the rides in Medieval Fair back to their original Old English spellings. Theming is important to the park, and whatever this next coaster ends up being, it's going to fit within that vision. Whether it's a wooden, wing, or inverted coaster, I'd be happy with any of those coaster models, and I think they'd be a great fit for the park. However, I think the deciding factor here is going to be what story the park wants to tell. Now, as I mentioned in my Future of Canada's Wonderland video from back in Season 4, I can see Wonderland eventually replacing Time Warp and/or Flight Deck with a B&M wing or invert. However, I can't see any of these concepts being that replacement. As I've discussed, none of them really make sense for that spot, and it's kind of interesting how each concept would occupy a completely different area within the park, meaning that there's space to eventually build all three if that's what the park chooses to do. I'm not saying that's what the park is planning, but it is possible. But going back to the Time Warp and Flight Deck plot of land, I have a theory, and that little tidbit is crucial. Here's the thing. Of the 3 concepts proposed in this survey, I'm surprised none of them were for Ziz. Now, for those of you who don't know the backstory here, there is a trio of monsters in Hebrew mythology, and each of them rule over a different realm. Behemoth is the beast of the land. Leviathan is the beast of the sea. But then there's a third creature, Ziz, the beast of the air. The idea that the park would build a coaster called Ziz to complete that trilogy has been floating around since Leviathan was announced at the end of 2011. It was brought up again when rumors circulated that the park would be building a dive coaster, but that project ended up becoming Yukon Striker. However, I might be a little crazy, but I think there's still hope that the concept isn't dead yet. Now, one could argue that the Ziz name and theme could be worked into the Blast Coaster concept, but I've always personally thought that it would be a perfect fit for World Expo once the park focuses their attention on revamping that area. And the interesting thing is that I think it could still be on the table. The only variable is that if the park builds a Blast Coaster, which could either be a wing coaster or an invert, Ziz would just have to be the opposite model. So yeah, if I were to place my bets, I think Ziz could become a reality by the end of the decade after this project is built. That, or I'm a delusional enthusiast holding on to a dream that died a long time ago. Either way, it's so much fun to speculate, and whatever Wonderland has on the horizon, I think it's going to be good. Again, I love how it's practically guaranteed that our next coaster will be story-driven and make use of interesting special effects. Wood, wing, invert, the park seems to have a good handle on what our coaster lineup needs, and I can't wait to see this next project begin sooner rather than later. But what do you think? Which concept would you like to see Wonderland build? And do you agree with my theory that Wonderland is saving the flight deck time warp plot for something different? Comment below and let me know. And for more fun theme park discussions and fun adventure vlogs from theme parks, attractions, and beyond, please consider becoming a subscriber. Of course, you can find me on social media as @ADVParker on Instagram, Threads, and Twitter, and @AdventuresWithParker on TikTok and Facebook. As always, I want to send some appreciation to all of my supporters on Patreon for all of the amazing things you do for the channel. And until next time, the adventures are calling. See ya!